Thank you, Professor Shen. First, I would like to express my appreciation that Shanghai Forum has helped to deepen dialogue and debates on Asia and the world. And I'm very glad that this year, 2017, Shanghai Forum has included the African dimension. And I hope this will be an important agenda in the coming years. I would like to thank Fudan University, the Korean Foundation for Advanced Studies, and Fudan Development Institute for giving me the privilege to be a speaker at this important forum. And I would like to thank the distinguished speakers who have been able to share their perspectives. My focus will be on cooperation and economic ties between Asia and Africa, with the China and Africa at the center of it. As we may know, there are two perspectives on this important and critical subject. One is what may be called the Eurocentric perspective, which tries to portray the African-China cooperation as neo-colonialism. And the second perspective is an African perspective or alternative perspective that views this cooperation that it can contribute to the economic transformation of Africa, as well as it can bring a win-win advantage to China and bring a much better world to everyone. So I will try to dwell on these issues. My focus will be on three important points. One will be on exploring the China-Africa cooperation as a broader framework. And I will try to hint the context and the dynamics and the content of this cooperation, and also the achievement and the constraints so far. On the second point, I would like to demonstrate how Ethiopia, as the pioneer of this China-Africa cooperation and the gateway to Africa, has been able to achieve economic transformation as well as to build productive cooperation between China and Africa. The last one would be a conclusive perspective that will focus on the pathways to the 21st century. And in order such cooperation to be sustainable and beneficial, it has to bring advantages to Africa, to China, as well as the broader world. First, we need to understand that the China-Africa cooperation has been able to be implemented and designed at a time when the global economy is stagnant, specifically after 2007 and 2008 financial crisis. And we also need to understand that we are in a very interconnected world, and whatever happens in one part of the globe will definitely affect the remaining part of the world in terms of economic dynamism, in terms of technological spillover, issues even related with migration, health, and terrorism. So with this interconnected world, every advantages and strengths we build will definitely have a much broader impact on the remaining part of the world. We also need to understand that the globalization, which has brought great prosperity to many millions of people, and also that has brought from poverty hundreds of millions, and that has created a great wealth, we also need to understand that it has widened inequality, and it has also brought marginalization of some regions, and this has brought some frustration and disappointment, in particular the youth. So it's very important that we try to contain or remedy the side effects, the negative effects of globalization. The other context we need to understand is China has set exemplary advancement in terms of poverty reduction, bringing about 700 million out of poverty. And it has also shown us that a country can advance and catch up in few decades. And as we all know, the forerunners, including the US, Japan, has taken them much longer years and decades, while China has been able to achieve quite successful catch-up in the last 4 decades. And we also recognize that China is a manufacturing powerhouse, contributing to 25% global manufacturing, which will have a significant impact on Africa as well. And it has become second largest global power and economy, and we believe it will have a significant impact in shaping the future. On Africa, although the standard view has been the pessimistic view, but Africa has made substantial progress in the last 2 decades. First, we have to recognize this is a continent with 1.2 billion and expected to be 2 billion by 2050. Currently, out of every 6 humanity, 1 is an African, and we cannot neglect this continent. It's also a continent with about 800 active workforce and with a growing middle income, and it has about 500 million consumer market. And increasingly in the last 2-3 decades, Africa has become much more stable and has reduced conflicts in comparison with the earlier time. And the last 15 years, Africa has been able to achieve about 5% GDP growth on average. And in comparison to the other continents except Asia, this has been considered as a moderate growth. Having said this, the China-African economic ties is based on 2 major pillars. One pillar is the Belt and Road Initiative, and this has been primarily officially public by President Xi in 2013. The Belt and Road Initiative that links Africa is the Maritime Silk Road, as we all know. But the more important pillar of the China-Africa cooperation is the establishment of FOCAC, or the Africa-China Cooperation Platform, which has now been conducted for the 6th time in Johannesburg in 2015. And during this period, there has been substantial growth and dynamics happening in Africa and in this cooperation as well. I would like to hint with some figures. The cooperation, in order to weigh the effectiveness of this cooperation, first we have to look at trade, we have to look at infrastructure development, and we have also to look at investment. In terms of trade, in 1980, China and Africa were only having trade relations amounting to $1 billion. And in year 2000, it increased to 10 billion. And in 2013, it has increased to 225 billion. It has been increasing and growing by 21% every year. And between year 2000, when FOCAC was established, and 2013, trade has increased by 20 times. This is a significant growth, and currently China is the largest trading partner of Africa. This is quite significant achievement, but we also see some major imbalances. For instance, Africa contributes 5% of trade with China, while it's 16% for Africa. So there is trade imbalance which we need to narrow down. Most of the products exported from Africa are primarily oil and mineral products which are not processed. And in the long term, this is not going to help the continent, and addressing this concern will be quite significant. The volume needs to be increased and also to be diversified and to be value added. But it has been quite significant, should be considered as significant progress. If we look at this volume, the additional dimension we may need is the second largest trading partner of Africa is India. And the volume of India-Africa trade is only 60 billion. So the difference between India and China is close to 120 billion. The second aspect we may look is infrastructure. First, we need to understand that infrastructure has significant impact in poverty reduction, in improving, in narrowing inequality, and improving inclusiveness. We also need to understand that an economy to be competitive must be supported by infrastructure. If we look at these two large countries, India and China, one of the key differences is the investment in infrastructure, which will have a significant impact in the competitiveness of the economy. Having said this, infrastructure has been an area where China has significantly contributed to Africa. Currently, China is the largest financier of infrastructure in Africa, and it's also its companies are the largest contractors. We need to understand that this increment in infrastructure will have a significant impact on the economy. On the third aspect, on investment, FDI outflow to Africa has increased in the last 2 decades, and currently it has been number 4 in year 2014, next to UK, US, and France in terms of investment stock. But it's expected, according to latest McKinsey study, that by 2020 it's going to be the largest FDI source. And here we also see that there is unevenness among many African countries who engage with China. To briefly highlight, Ethiopia has been a pioneer in engaging with China, and the key aspects of this has been that Ethiopia has been showing the fastest economic growth in the continent, about 11% for the last 14 years without resource boom or without any growth in mineral or oil industry. And Ethiopia has also been engaging with China in qualitative way. And one key aspect of this cooperation is, for instance, the FDI flow to Ethiopia from China is primarily in manufacturing. 66% of China FDI in Ethiopia is in manufacturing, while on average in Africa it's about 25 to 30%. So that Ethiopia's basic approach to economic transformation has really helped to shape the cooperation between China and Africa, Ethiopia, in a way to sustain its economic growth. Infrastructure has been the major focus of Ethiopia, and we had invested billions even from our own resources, and we are building energy, railway lines, transportation infrastructure, and we have been expanding universities and technical schools. And recently, we have focused on expansion of industrial parks. So the key lesson here is that an African country to benefit from the cooperation between China and respective country would be the country needs to have a solid economic transformation agenda, and here China can play a positive role. And for a partnership to be quite successful, an active engagement on both sides is quite important. Lastly, I would like to mention that the China-Ethiopia cooperation has covered, for instance, the construction of a railway line from Addis Ababa to Djibouti. It's electric powered, it's 120 kilometers, it's one of the most modern in the continent. In terms of energy, we have basically focused on clean energy and renewable energy, involving wind farms, involving hydropower, and we want to build on it. So sustainability is quite important. In terms of infrastructure programs, the way that we try to do is that we focus on quality infrastructure. We try to push Chinese companies to deliver on time and also to benefit from value for money. And the infrastructure programs in Ethiopia usually take quite short time. We build parks in 9 months or 12 months. We complete lines in 3 to 4 years, and this has really helped us to benefit from the resources. Ethiopian Airlines is one of the leading airlines globally, and it has also played important role in building the connectivity between Ethiopia and, between China and Africa. It's an airline flying to many cities in China, and it has become a major bridge. And this has also helped Ethiopia to develop as aviation hub. And we believe this is an important bridge between both countries. Having said this, I would like to conclude on a few points. First, the China-Africa, in order to sustain the growth and to shape the future, first, every African country should focus on economic transformation. It has to diversify from a specific industry. We have seen that with the fall of commodity prices, many oil-producing African countries have suffered from lack of diversification. So having an economic transformation agenda is a condition for making these programs quite successful. The second aspect that we need to focus is that we shouldn't see China as a source of resources. Ethiopia mobilizes resources from Eurobond, from Credit Suisse, from many European banks, from World Bank. For us, the key point is African countries should also look at China in terms of policy learning. China is a nation that has been able to reduce poverty in hundreds of millions, and African countries can learn from this. China has also a unique policy approach, and Ethiopia has benefited by learning on this policy approach. Experimenting and piloting is one of the unique practices in China. Learning the truth from factors is one of the key approaches in China. In terms of industrial policy, also many African countries can learn. So we believe the policy learning is a key dimension that African countries should really consider. And developing the domestic linkages in terms of talent, local talent, management skills, and domestic industrialists is also quite important. The second pillar should be, it must be based on values and principles. And the reason that we don't say this is a new colonialism is we have seen African countries being pressured by former colonial powers even until recently. And the basis of partnership between China and Africa has been based on peaceful coexistence, on non-interference in domestic agendas, on mutual respect, on win-win agendas. This is very, very important. Africa has experienced the conditionality agenda of the World Bank, IMF, and many of its donors and partners. And African countries should be able to sit on driver's seat, and there should not be any interference in their local politics or domestic politics, be it in terms of building democracy or also respecting human rights. Democracy and human rights are built domestically and not transferred from external powers. So the cooperation has been based on values and principles which are central to UN Charter. Peaceful coexistence, non-interference, mutual respect are the key blocks of United Nations Charter. And we believe China should continue to be committed to this. And China also should promote these values and principles in G20 summit and international platform. We also believe that all this cooperation will help Europe as well as other advanced economies. Europe's major concern is migration. And migration can be controlled from Africa if jobs are created in Africa, if the economic dynamism contributes to, in Africa also improves. So it really helps to reduce, contain terrorism, to fight terrorism, to create a more stable world, and also to improve the livelihood of the poor wherever they are. So these are the key pillars that should be considered in sustaining the China-Africa cooperation, and also to bring this cooperation contribute also to global and world well-being. And here the key issue is In 21st century, Africans are determined to make that this century will help Africa to catch up, and we believe the next frontier will be Africa. Thank you very much.